what a beautiful prayer we just sang. And of course, I cast all my cares upon you. Of course, that was quoted, a song written from 1 Peter 5. But where did Peter get that thought? Peter got that thought from the psalm that we're going to be reading today. 1 Peter 5:7 is a quote right from the Psalm 55. And so today we're taking Psalm 55, and before we read it, I want to give you a little background so you can be listening for these things. This psalm might have been the most painful psalm that David ever wrote, because he's writing about the deep wound that he had in his heart when he was betrayed by his best friend. This psalm was written by David at that time when his son Absalom had rebelled against him, and there was a conspiracy against David, and David's very best friend, his counselor, decided to turn on David and side with Absalom in the rebellion. And you'll see that reflected in the words that you're about to hear as Lorraine reads Psalm 55. But out of that deep, deep pain of David of having been betrayed and forsaken and backstabbed by his friend, comes that beautiful promise, cast all your care upon him, for he cares for you. So we trust that as we go through this psalm today, you will experience casting your care upon the Lord, and you'll leave this time together freer than when you entered this study and time of prayer. So let's look at Psalm 55. Lorraine, would you read Psalm 55, and then we'll jump into it, making some comments, and then praying our way through and worshiping our way through Psalm 55.
Okay, give ear to my prayer, O God, and do not hide yourself from my supplication. Attend to me and hear me. I am restless in my complaint and moan noisily, because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked. For they bring down trouble upon me, and in wrath they hate me. My heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling have come upon me, and horror has overwhelmed me. So I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Indeed, I would wander far off and remain in the wilderness. I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and tempest. Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go around it on its walls. Iniquity and trouble are also in the midst of it. Destruction is in its midst. Destruction and oppression and deceit do not depart from its streets. For it is not an enemy who reproaches me. Then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me who has exalted himself against me. Then I could hide from him. But it was you, a man, my equal, my companion, and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together and walked to the house of God in the throng. Let death seize them. Let them go down alive into hell, for wickedness is in their dwellings and among them. As for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord shall save me. Evening and morning at noon I will pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. He has redeemed my soul in peace from the battle that was against me, for there was many against me. God will hear and afflict them, even he who abides from of old, because they do not change. Therefore they do not fear God. He has put forth his hand against those who were at peace with him. He has broken his covenant. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he shall sustain you. He shall never permit the righteous to be moved. But you, O God, shall bring them down to the pit of destruction. Bloodthirsty and deceitful men shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in you.
Well, thank you, Lorraine. And as she was reading that, you could hear David's pain, David's deep, deep pain. In verse 2, he talks about being restless. I am restless in my complaint. And also he's talking about moaning noisily. The trouble has come upon me in verse 3. But look at verse 4. My heart is severely pained, and terrors and fearfulness and trembling and horror overwhelm in verse 5. In verses 6 or 8, maybe you felt this way. He said, I just want to fly away. I just wish I could go away. He doesn't even know where he's going. He just says, oh, that I had wings as a dove. I would fly away. I'd be at rest. I just want to get out of this. I just want to go somewhere. I just want to get away. David is experiencing the deep, deep pain of being wounded by somebody he trusted. And you've probably been there. I know there are many in our society, many in our culture that are suffering the wounds of a divorce. I mean, you trusted that person and you gave your heart to that person, and then somewhere along the line over the years, they betrayed you and they used that word divorce. I want a divorce, and there you are, deeply wounded. There was an old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words, they never hurt me. Oh, that's so untrue. Words are the deepest, deepest wounds. And David was wounded by words. The Bible talks about a talebearer revealing secrets, and a whisperer separating friends, and the pain of a backbiting tongue. And now David, his own son, has turned on him. But now his main confidant, he's been betrayed. Look at verses 20 and 21. He's talking about Ahithophel is the guy's name, and he was David's counselor and his best friend. He has put forth his hands against those who are at peace with him. He's broken his covenant. I was at peace with him. I thought we had a covenant friendship, but he broke that. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, but they were drawn swords. In other words, David's looking back and saying, all the things he said, all the things he promised me, he was just getting ready to stab me in the back. David is crushed by this. Look at verses 12 through 14. For it is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me, who has exalted himself against me, then I could hide from him. But it was you, a man my equal, my companion, and mine acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together and walked in the house of God in the throng. What is he saying? We prayed together. We took our burdens to the Lord together. We shared our hearts. And you turned on me. If it was an enemy doing this, I would have expected it. But it was you, my close friend. Notice he even calls it in verse 13, my companion. We went into the house of God together. We prayed together. We carried each other's burdens. And now you've turned on me. And you're with that throng that wants my life. David spoke also about this in Psalm 41. Let me read those verses for you. Psalm 41, 7 through 9. He says, all who hate me whisper. So he's being hurt by words. All who hate me whisper together against me. Against me they devise my hurt. An evil disease, they say, clings to him. And now that he lies down, he will rise up no more. Even my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, who ate bread, has lifted up his heel against me. He says, he ate my bread. He sat at my table. He was my trusted friend. And now he's out saying all these things about me. And oh, the deep, deep pain of being betrayed by somebody you trusted. Somebody you believed in. And yet, the Bible tells us that even when father and mother forsake us, the Lord will take care of us. That's in Psalm 27, verse 10. Even when father and mother forsake, the Lord will take care. Well, I'd like us to sing another song of worship. And I want you to turn your heart to the Lord and worship. I want you to give him your heart as you worship. And then I'm going to give you 3 sayings out of this psalm and 1 Peter 5 on how to deal with this kind of pain. Because not only do I want you to be able to pray for the people you know that are in this kind of pain, but I know many of you watching, you're in this kind of pain now. Maybe it was something that happened years ago, and every so often something reminds you of that deep pain, and that wound opens up again. How are you going to deal with that? Well, we want to deal with it the way David dealt with it. Some of it's ugly. It's not pretty. But he gets free. And that's what we want for you. So I'll give you those 3 sayings in a moment. But let's just worship again. And as we are, just say, Lord, take my heart, all of it, even those wounded parts and parts that might have gotten angry and maybe even bitter. Take my heart, Lord. And we'll get free today. So let's worship him one more time, then we'll get back to this song. Hallelujah.
What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege
of the answer is to carry everything to the Lord in prayer. And what a friend we have in Jesus. You know what the proverb says? There is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. I want you to remember that when you're feeling forsaken and backstabbed, betrayed by a friend or a family member or someone you trusted, remember that Jesus is a friend that sticks closer, and He will never do that to you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And He's there to offer His blood to stand up for you. He's not going to be a slanderer or a backstabber. But what do we do when someone does that to us? Well, I want you to remember these 3 sayings. Number 1, forgive, don't fester. What do I mean, don't fester? Well, look at verse 2. He says, He also brought me up. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong one. Verse 2 of 55, he says, attend to me and hear my... I was kidding Lorraine before the broadcast. Don't read the wrong chapter now. So there I go. But Psalm 55:2, attend to me and hear me. I am restless in my complaint and moan noisily. There's something in him that won't rest. It just keeps festering, and it makes him moan, and it makes him noisy on the inside. There's no rest. It's festering. If somebody wounds you, you've got to get that wound cleaned. You've got to get it cleaned out. You can't let it fester. You can't be like, David can't go on much longer like he is in verse 2. He's got to get to the answer. And you got to get to the answer too. And it begins with forgiveness. You see, we are forgiven by God, so we need to forgive others. I don't have time to go into the detail, but Ahithophel was a close relative of Bathsheba. And he really was very, very wounded with David's sin. And yet David had been forgiven of that sin. And because David had been forgiven of his sin, now some of the consequences are rolling down upon him. And Ahithophel turns on him. Well, David, if you've enjoyed the forgiveness of God that you talked about back in Psalm 32, now you have to extend that forgiveness to others. David, you can't let this fester. You can't let this restlessness continue. You can't let this moaning continue. So if someone has turned on you, just think of it this way. Jesus, you forgave me, so I need to forgive them. And you won't ever be free until you forgive. So that's the first one, is forgive, don't let it fester. Now, let's all turn, and if you have a Bible, turn to 1 Peter chapter 5, because under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, Peter picks up on these words of David, and he turns them into this beautiful promise that we began our time singing with. 1 Peter chapter 5, he says in verse 5 of chapter 5, likewise you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another, and be clothed with humility. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares upon Him, for He cares for you. Notice it says casting. You're in the process of casting, but you can't be casting your cares on the Lord if you're not first humbling yourself. He said, clothe yourselves with humility. Humble yourselves. What happens when somebody hurts us, when somebody stabs us or betrays us, is we don't want to humble ourselves. We want to harden ourselves. We want to say, I'm never going to let that happen again. I'm never going to let anybody get close to me like that again. And we start hardening our hearts. And what we do, we shut out other people. We think we're shutting out the pain. We're really not. But we shut out God. Because you only have one heart. And if you let it get hard, it's hard toward God too. Humble. In the book of Isaiah, let me read you a couple verses from the book of Isaiah. And these are beautiful promises. Isaiah chapter 57, verse 15, he says, for thus says the high and lofty one who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place with him who has a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. What does God say? God says, if you'll humble yourself and be contrite, humble and broken before me, I will revive your spirit. So do you want your spirit revived? Do you want your spirit to come alive again after this wounding? Well, the answer is in humbling and being contrite before the Lord. Another great promise in Isaiah 66:2, for all those things my hand has made, and all those things exist, says the Lord. But on this one will I look, on him who is poor and of a contrite spirit, who trembles at my word. And so what is he saying? He's saying, if you want to have me regard you and turn to you, you got to be humble. So don't harden, humble. Has your heart been hardened in any way because of what's happened to you? You know, you have a choice. You can try and defend yourself from more pain and harden your heart, or you can go on feeling the pain and keep your heart soft and take your pain to the Lord. And this is the third saying I want you to remember, and we're gonna sing it in a moment and let you pray on this right where you're at. But here's the last one. Number one, we said forgive, don't fester. Don't let it fester. Forgive that person. Choose to forgive. Number two, humble, don't harden. Submit yourself to God. Come to God and say, Lord, this is beyond me. I need you. I humble myself. And worship is a part of that, keeping your heart soft. If you're not a person of worship, you're not going to be able to keep your heart soft. So that's important, worship. But number three, cast, don't carry. The word here for burden in Psalm 55, actually the Hebrew word for burden really means that which the Lord has given. Do you realize God has allowed this to happen? He's given it to you in a sense. So don't you try and carry it yourself. Cast it back on the Lord. In 1 Peter 5:7, it gives us two Greek words that are fascinating. It says, cast your care upon Him. And that word care is worry, anxiety in the Greek. But there's another word used for care in the second part of that verse. Cast your care upon Him, your worry, your anxiety, for He cares for you. And that word care is the Greek word melo. It means to take care of. Here's what he's saying. Take your worries, your anxieties, your fears, put them on Him. Because He does want to take care of you. Throw them upon Him. How can you throw them upon Him? I want to give you two things, and then we'll do it. Number one, how do you cast your care upon Him? Well, I think the Psalms teach us you should express your feelings to God. Express your feelings to God. Have you noticed in the Psalms how many times David says some things that really aren't so kosher? You know, I hate them with a perfect hatred. I mean, even in this psalm, he talks about them going down to hell. And I mean, is that the way we're supposed to talk? But guess what? That's the way David was feeling. He wasn't expressing it to other people, but he was expressing it to God. Look at verse 4. My heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. I mean, he's talking about the pain of his heart. He's expressing that pain to the Lord. Fearfulness and trembling have come upon me, and horror has overwhelmed me. He's just saying how he feels. He's not saying all those things are right. He's saying, God, this is how I feel. This is what I'm going through. And verse 15, let death seize them. Let them go down alive into hell. I mean, he said that. Let death seize them. Let them go alive down into hell. So wait a minute. I thought you said we're supposed to be forgiven. Well, don't you have those feelings sometimes? So what are you going to do with those feelings? He's not saying it's right to feel that way. He's just saying, well, this is how I feel. If you start expressing your feelings to the Lord, guess what? He can start dealing with them. And then prayer. And then prayer. Look at 16 through 19. As for me, I will call upon God. Now, so I'm going to get hold of it. This is the way I feel, but I'm going to call upon God. And the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon I will pray. Cry aloud, and He shall hear my voice. And He has redeemed my soul in peace from the battle that was against me. For there were many against me. God will hear and afflict them, even He who abides from of old. So he says, this is how I feel, but I'm going to pray. So regardless of how you feel, pray. Express those feelings to the Lord and let Him sort them out with you. And then pray. We're going to do that right now as Nicole leads us in song. I want you just to pray. Express any feelings you have. Maybe you want to say, God, I feel angry at this person. Help me with that. God, I feel frustrated with this person. Help me with that. Whatever your feelings are, you take them to the Lord now. He'll hear you and He'll help you sort them out. Yes. And He'll help you get to the place of trust and victory. Yes. So let's just do that as we listen to this song. You pray. Pray at home. Cast your care upon the Lord. He cares for you.
I cast all my cares upon you. I lay all of my burdens down at your feet. And any time that I don't know what to do, I will
that you're doing what David did, and he took his cares, his burdens, his hurts, and he surrendered them to the Lord. Verse 22 of Psalm 55, cast your burden on the Lord, and he shall sustain you. In other words, he's going to take care of you. If you're willing to turn it over to him and submit it to him, he will take care of you. He will sustain you. God has a purpose in what you're going through. He really, really does. And as you submit it to him and cast it upon him, he will fulfill his purpose. But you, O God, shall bring them down to the pit of destruction, bloodthirsty and deceitful men shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in you. Here's what he's saying. Lord, they're going to eventually fall. If they're not right with you, they're going to eventually fall, but I'm going to trust in you. I'm going to trust in you. And isn't that what this is really all about? Getting back to that place of trust. And saying, Lord, I believe you're sovereign. I believe you're in control. And I'm just going to turn this over to you, and I'm not going to carry it anymore. And I'm going to forgive and not fester. And David wrote another psalm, it's Psalm 3, about the same time. And he got the victory. Notice what he says in Psalm 3. And this was also written at the same time when Ahithophel had betrayed him. He says, Lord, how they have increased who trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. But you, Lord, are a shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice. He heard me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept, and I awoke, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who've set themselves round about against me. Well, there he's got the victory, doesn't he? See, over in Psalm 55, he's laying down his burdens. He's expressing his emotions and this troubling and festering within him. But he does surrender it to the Lord in a humble, contrite heart. And he gets the victory. He says, Lord, you're the glory and the lifter up of my head. Notice he even says he had trouble in his heart, restlessness, fretting, festering. But notice after he laid it down before the Lord, he says, I slept. The Lord sustained me. I even had a good night's sleep. I'm not going to be afraid anymore. All these people are still out there, but I'm not going to be afraid anymore. Why? Because he's laid it down. He's surrendered it. He's cast his care upon the Lord. And he knows the Lord is the one that's in control and caring for him. I want to tell you a really quick story, and then we'll close with, Lorraine has a couple thoughts, and then we'll sing our way out of this segment. But a good friend of mine, Rich Collinridge, was a missionary in Equatorial Guinea, West Africa. And he shared this story with me when I was over there with him. We were driving down this old road, and it was all overgrown by jungle growth, and it was bumpy, and we're jumping around in the vehicle, bouncing around in the vehicle. And he said, I got to tell you what happened to me on a road just like this. He said, I was driving along on a hot, humid day. It was so muggy and miserable and hot. And I saw these ladies carrying baskets on their heads. They call them burdens. That's what they call them. And I felt sorry for him. It was so hot and humid. And so he was driving a pickup truck. It had a flatbed on the back. And so he stopped the truck and he said, why don't you sit on the back of my truck? I'll give you a ride to the next village. And so they were grateful because it was hot. And they sat on the back of that truck. And he started off again. But he looked in his rearview mirror and he saw them sitting on the back of his truck. And they still had the baskets on their heads. And they're hitting potholes and bouncing up around. And he thought, why do they still have the baskets on their heads? And so he stopped the truck, and he got out, he came around the back, and he said, ladies, why do you still have the baskets on your heads? And they said, we don't want to dishonor you. He said, what? Well, in our culture, the women carry these things, and we can't have you carry it. That would dishonor you. And so if we put it down on your truck, then you're carrying it, not us. That would dishonor you. We don't want to dishonor you. And he laughed. He said, don't you realize I'm carrying you? You're on my truck. So if I'm carrying you, I'm already carrying the burden. Take them off your head, put them down. And you know what? They wouldn't. They said, no, we will not dishonor you. So he drove away, looking in the back mirror, still on their heads, bouncing around. Why? They wouldn't lay it down. They wouldn't cast their care, so they carried it themselves. If you're a believer, Jesus is carrying you. If you're a believer, he's already carried your burdens. He doesn't want you to carry it on your own. He's already carried. If he's carrying you, then he's carrying your burden.
Yes.
So why are you carrying it? Why don't you cast it down? He knows how deeply it hurts to be wounded. Remember what happened to him? He knows. He feels it. He's there with you. Forgive. That's what he did. Soften your heart. Don't harden it. Cast it on the Lord. He cares for you. He cares for you. Let's live out Psalm 55. Cast your care upon the Lord. He cares for you. Lorraine, close us with a thought, and then Nicole, if you would sing another song with us.
Thank you, Lord God. Examples abound of faith in God in spite of circumstances. those situations arise that seem overwhelming and hopeless and oppressive and fearful, the Psalms point to God as our refuge. God is our refuge. Put all those cares on Him, that you may sleep well at night, that you may be refreshed in the morning, because you've cast those cares, those burdens, that hopelessness and oppressiveness and fearfulness on the Lord. Cast, throw, fling your burdens on the Lord. Do not hold them unto yourself. God is able to take them and desires to carry your troubles for you. Allow Him to carry your troubles. Cast them on Him.
Amen. Let's just think about the Lord and think about these things as Nicole closes us with this song.